Human beings to this very day live in fear of beasts that live in our wilderness. If it weren't for our ability to use weapons at a high level, we would stand no chance against the giant carnivores that we share the lands with. And the largest and most fearsome of these beasts were the giant short-faced bears, some of which are the largest land mammal predators of all time. Thankfully, for the safety of our ancestors and adding a little sadness regarding the loss of really big cool animals in recent years, these bears would go extinct thousands of years ago. But did they really? Because many people throughout the years have had sightings of what could imply a holdout population of giant short-faced bears. So join me today as we look at some bears, some extinct, some probably real, and all of them epic, in our first installment of the Cryptid Corner, a new series where we are going to take a look at some cryptids and what may have inspired them. So, without further ado, let's go sit in the corner. Let's get into the video. Before we talk about our cryptids today, let's talk about some big bears. The short-faced bears consist of 3 genuses of bears, but for the most part, we're going to be focusing on 2 of them, Arctodus and Arctotherium. Both genus of bear contain members that closely resemble each other with similar builds and sizes despite being separated from millions of years of evolution, serving as great examples of convergent evolution. And both bears possessed long limbs that allowed them to run at fast speeds, with paleontologists believing them to reach speeds of 40 miles per hour or 60 kilometers per hour. And the deep skulls of the bears gives them a short-faced look, despite them having larger skulls than other bears, and having a great sense of smell, being able to smell food from miles away. Arctodus bears spanned most of North America, found all the way down the west coast into Mexico, into the Midwest, and were found as far east as Florida, while Arctotherium lived in South America and in several parts of Central America. The Arctodus bears were the smaller of the 2, although I wouldn't say that to these guys' faces. They weighed up to 2,100 pounds, or 950 kilos, stood 5'6", or 1.67 meters tall at the shoulder, and an astonishing 11 feet, or 3.4 meters tall on its hind legs. And although they most likely lived a similar lifestyle to other bears, their size and long limbs gave them access to much larger prey while they were alive, with paleontologists even believing them to hunt baby mammoths and other massive prey of the time. It was even believed that the Arctodus bear may have delayed human expansion into North America, and given how we did, I don't blame them for gatekeeping America. And this theory isn't far-fetched, as remains have proven that humans and cave bears have had several fatal encounters. Down in South America, the Arctotherium reigned in a similar manner to their North American cousins, and they were massive, one species known as the Augustans, weighing up to 2,600 pounds, or 1,200 kilos, with one massive specimen believing to have weighed as much as 4,500 pounds, or 2,040 kilos, and standing as tall as 14 feet, or 4.3 meters, high on its hind legs, which is so massive it is taller than an African elephant while posted up. Damage found on the bones of megafauna leads paleontologists to believe that it both scavenged and hunted the colossal creatures that lived alongside it, and they used their size to their advantage, squatting in ground sloth burrows to the point that ground sloths would have to make multiple burrows to avoid having to deal with these bears, and I don't blame them.
But I can't take this shit no more, man.
Arctotherium would begin to shrink and diversify its species and their respective sizes going into the mid-Pleistocene, with some 700,000 years ago when the Augustans would disappear from the fossil record. Many species shifted into more herbivorous-focused diets during the Great American Interchange, when new carnivores were introduced to compete over resources, while species lower in South America managed to retain their large carnivoric niches by not having to deal with the new competition coming in much later down the road. These bears' stay on this earth wouldn't last forever, as the Arctodus bears would go extinct some 11 to 10,000 years ago, most likely due to climate change and human hunting causing the megafauna it relied upon to go extinct and it being outcompeted by other bears that call our land home today. The Arctotheriums would hold on a bit longer, but all the same would go out some 9,000 years ago due to changes in the South American fauna and getting out niched by other animals. Closest living relative of these bears, and the last short-faced bears alive today, would be the spectacled bear. These bears live in the Andean mountains of South America and tend to be more peaceful, eating mostly plants, but it's still a bear, so I wouldn't go getting friendly with them. And on occasion, they've been known to breed with some down bad Arctotheriums. And to that, I say,
You can't fuck that land, dog.
how? And with that, the sun would set on the giant short-faced bears. But what if it didn't? What if they stuck around a little longer? Or rather, what if they never went extinct at all? The first ever settlers of the Americas who crossed the Bering Strait or the Kelp Highway all those years ago have definitely had encounters with some of the last of the Arctotherium and hunted the same prey that they ate. And thousands of years after these bears seemingly vanished, stories of stiff-legged bears can be found throughout many different native cultures across North America. And when looking at these giant bears, the long, stiff legs are the first thing that sets them apart from other bears. Well, besides the short face, but we'll get to that. Stiff-legged bear is somewhat of an umbrella term for many of these creatures, also having terms along the lines of man-eater, with these diverse cultures each having interesting parallels. For starters, most of them can be described as massive hairless bear-like creatures with stiff legs that are hostile towards humans. The Iroquois of New York have a legend of the Nyagahe, which is a great bear that loses its fur as a result of eating human flesh and is near impervious to human attacks, with the Penobscot of Maine telling a near identical story when discussing the Gisiawas, also translating to Great Bear. And the Innu, Cree, and Naskapi people of modern-day Canada tell the tale of the Kachutikashku, an enormous hairless bear with a massive head. Tribes in the southeastern United States would also tell tales of naked, man-eating creatures, with the Seminole and Creek tribes referring to a large feline animals, with Alabama and Coasati tribes referring to more bear-like creatures when talking about their respective man-eaters. So, could these sightings support a thriving population of Arctodus in North America? Well, not really, but it could mean something equally as interesting. For starters, a naked bear that was described attacking people doesn't necessarily prove that it was an Arctodus bear, as bears tend to just appear more stiff and long-legged when they don't have their fur, as they may be sightings with bears with mange that probably have gone mad for, I don't know, being ugly or something. I ain't gonna judge. And secondly, bears are already pretty damn big, with grizzly bears being able to achieve massive sizes of 10 feet tall or 3 meters high on its hind legs and weighing up to 1,500 pounds or 680 kilos. But there are other details that may suggest that most of these stories don't tie into actual bears at all, but mammoths. And that sounds pretty strange at first, but many folklorists agree that these encounters refer to stories influenced by some of the final mammoth sightings passed down orally from generation to generation, or maybe even just from the remains of mammoths or mastodons being found by many tribes. The tribes referring to these creatures as bears isn't an indicator of it being a bear, as other creatures in Native American folklore are referred to as bears, bison, or even beavers, while not being a direct comparison to these animals. Additionally, some Native American tribes would refer to the African elephants as big man-eater in their language upon seeing them for the first time. The primary reason they would be referred to as bears is to describe their body structure, with similar gaits and posture. Many reported these animals being the size of 2 horses with big ears and round footprints, much more fitting of a mammoth than a bear. And the mention of them being naked could imply something remarkable, as this could hint at some of these proboscideans not being woolly mammoths, but Columbian mammoths. colossal mammoths that went extinct around the same time as the Arctodus did, and was one of the largest land mammals to ever live. One important aspect of this segment is the fact that these stories were passed down orally for generations by multiple different storytellers who would each tell respective stories for different reasons. Some stories are used to explain nature's phenomenon, such as the story of, fittingly for this video, the Bear Lodge, or as Westerners would call it, the Devil's Tower in Wyoming, where a mythical bear would keep climbing up the side of the mountain and falling down and just keep trying to climb back up to the top, where people would spear it and it would keep falling down, explaining why there were a lot of narrow scratch-like marks on the side of the mountain. And other stories are told to teach the youth lessons of morality or survival methods, while other stories are tellings of real-life events, sometimes exaggerated or biased, but others are as is. The fact that these stories were passed down for thousands of years through oral tradition, while Europeans struggled to preserve iconic poems and stories of their era, while these stories are still readily available, is fascinating. Hell, even with the internet, there are many modern stories that become lost media, but it seems like there isn't much hope for short-faced bears sticking around, right? Well, fast forward a bit to more recent times, there would be reported sightings and remains of strange-looking bears thought to be the last surviving short-faced bears. Starting in Banks Island, Canada in 1864, a group of Inuit brothers would discover a strange bear with a tan fur and brown rings around its eyes during a hunt that they would manage to bring down in a close encounter with this animal. They would send the head and pelt to American naturalist Roger R. MacFarlane, who would later send the remains to the Smithsonian for storage, as a little kerfuffle known as the American Civil War would delay a closer examination of this strange bear for a long time. It would not be until 1918 where Dr. Clinton Hart Merriam would examine the skull of the bear, claiming it not to be a polar bear, but being found too far north from the brown bear's natural range for it to have been one. Merriam would go on to claim the skull's closest match was an Arctodus bear, believing it to be a surviving member of the species evolved to take on the similar niche as a polar bear. The bear killed by the hunters was thought to be the last of its kind until 2006, when a hunter named Jim Battelle would encounter an unusual bear while hunting in the southern end of Banks Island, Canada. Battelle would shoot the bear, finding the bear to be a perfect match to the MacFarlane bear. But this bear wasn't a short-faced bear. Instead, it was the first ever recorded polar grizzly hybrid found in nature. You see, polar bears and brown bears are the closest related bear species out there, with the two only being separated by about 250,000 or 100,000 years apart. And with climate change forcing polar bears to venture more south, breeding with grizzlies is a far more common occurrence, creating Groller or Hisley bears. Interestingly, later down the line, Dr. Blaine W. Schubert would confidently identify the MacFarlane bear as a female brown bear, seemingly disproving a surviving Arctodus while still discovering an entirely new bear in the process. Starting in the 1950s throughout Upper Canada, all the way down throughout the American South, reports came in of strange bears with seemingly cat or gorilla-like bodies and short faces. These bears would be referred to as the alternative name of the Arctodus, the Bulldog bear, or as the people of Appalachia would call them, Booger bears. And although Bulldog bear is a really cool name, I'm gonna call them Booger bears because I just love that. These bears were told to be fierce and powerful, being strong enough to carry off and hunt fully grown moose all by themselves. The people of the Yukon region in Canada also linked these animals to another cryptid known as Saitochin, an enormous animal thought to have been a remaining ground sloth, but we are not going down the ground sloth rabbit hole right now. That is for another time. Anyways, a more popular theory, pushed by anthropologist and cryptozoologist Dale Drennan, claims that Bigfoot, yep, the Bigfoot of legend, is not actually an ape, but a bear, potentially even being a descendant Arctodus that had shrunk down slightly and picked up more ape like characteristics in order to adapt to a forest environment. In 1967 in Kentucky, a farmer shot a large bear with cat like features that had been stealing his cattle. And in 1995, a man named Billy Hunter would encounter a bizarre creature resembling a mix of a polar bear, a wolf, a cat, and an ape while hunting deer in northern Michigan. Now, these reports are pretty interesting and, at a glance, are pretty convincing. But there's a couple problems. Firstly, regarding the bear in Kentucky, the case was only referring to a 6'7" bear that clocked in at about 650 pounds, which is still big, but not too noteworthy regarding a grizzly. The only bizarre aspect is the cat like features, but without a skull, we wouldn't know for sure. Although, it could probably be a grizzly black bear hybrid. But the Michigan case, there were a few details I left out that cast doubt on this story entirely. Firstly, the report was also described this bizarre animal to have reptile-like skin folds or scales, which is just really strange. But even if you believe that, the biggest discrepancy of this story was the note of his rifle, with him saying his rifle was an H&K 36. And I'm not a gun person, but that is not a thing. But he probably just meant a Heckler & Koch G36. This rifle is not suited for hunting deer, as it wasn't even available for civilian purchase in the US. It is a NATO rifle. Hell, this rifle wouldn't even be in production until a year later, in 1996. So ultimately, it seems that he tried to make his story seem more believable by sprinkling in a bunch of tactical and gun lingo, but when you actually look into it, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but the gun is the biggest discrepancy, not the big ape, bear, lizard thing that he found.
What man bear pig? You man bear pig. It's man bear pig.
Now, let's shift our attention across the pond at the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, where a truly giant bear is said to live. Kamchatka is already home to some of the largest brown bears in the world, due to it essentially being bear heaven. But people of the peninsula have reported bears even larger than these giants. These legendary bears were referred to as Bergman's bear, pants sagging down, caterpillar bear, and, more fittingly, God bear. These bears were giants, standing 4'5" at the shoulder and weighing 1.5 tons, with grayish fur, a small head, and long, fat bodies with their stomachs sagging down between its legs, leading to its name translating to pants sagging down, along with the strange caterpillar-like gait referring to its alternate name. Some think it to be an ancient brown bear species that stuck around, but others think these bears could be surviving descendants of Arctodus. As stated earlier, it was theorized that early humans were kept from entering North America through the Bering Strait due to the Arctodus bear. But what if instead of it just running us out, it followed us into Russia? Here, these bears would have plenty of food, land, and people to chase. A Swedish zoologist named Sten Bergman would research these bears through strange pelts and large footprints, at least until a minor disagreement known as the Cold War would come along and cease research into these animals. Interestingly, it is believed that the population of these bears increased due to the Soviet military restricting access to the area, giving god bears and mortal bears alike a place to thrive. And in the coming years, god bear sightings would increase, with many stories and reported pictures coming out. Although a lot of these pictures just seem to be like brown bears, but I'm not really a bear expert. This just kind of looks like a fat brown bear, though. And even if this is a new bear, it doesn't really mean that it is a relative of the Arctodus, but Arctodus bears have been around for a while, so maybe they could have came into Russia 1,000 years ago before humans and evolved to become brown bear-like, even before people tried to cross over. But with that said, I think these are brown bears that need to hit the gym a bit, hop on the treadmill, lay off the salmon. Now we shift our attention down to the short-faced bear capital of the world, South America. And although the almighty Augustusans went extinct well before man stepped foot in South America, the other Arctotherium species hanged on for a little bit longer. And in the late 1890s, reports of massive bear-like tracks were found in the Patagonian wilderness, along with reports of large quadrupedal creatures lining up to either ground sloths or bears. And this is the ground sloth video. This is the bear video. This was a huge discovery, as the only bear that is alive today and back then in South America was the spectacled bear, which, as we noted before, is on the smaller size when it comes to bears. So, with these finds, influencing Encyclopedia Britannica to claim that the Arctotherium bears may still be alive somewhere in the South American wilderness. And in 1946, a large black bear cryptid known as the Milne would be spotted by American explorer Leonard Clark after large animal tracks were found living along the Ucayali River in Peru. The bear was spotted eating ants from a rotten tree and was a great swimmer. The Milne was far larger than the spectacled bear, with 14-inch long footprints, and lacked the distinct facial markings that they had, ruling it out as a possible suspect. The lead theory behind this bear is that it could be a remaining member of Arctotherium that had evolved to be more aquatic, similar to a river otter. Now, after looking into the history of these giant bears and all these cryptid bears with similar descriptions and looking through folklore spanning back thousands of years, do I think that these bears survived until the modern age? Although I think it is super unlikely that they're still out there, instances like the Pisley and the identity of the MacFarlane's bear only being discovered less than 20 years ago proves that we know less about bears and animals in general than we claim to, and what we know can be changed in an instant, with even massive bears flying under the radar. So, regarding the Arctodus, maybe a surviving species of them could still be alive somewhere in remote northern Canada. Arctotherium seems a bit more suspect, as bears just don't seem to do well in South America in the recent climate, but with the uncharted Amazon, it is possible that they could be hidden deep within the rainforest, adapted to another niche. And ancient animals that only recently went extinct are fascinating to me, as animals our ancestors would have encountered on a day-to-day basis are now merely bones, left for us to piece together and memories from a time long forgotten. Thank you for sticking around. This was the first installment on a new series that I want to do called the Cryptid Corner. So that's our first Cryptid Corner episode. This was very fun looking into a singular topic like this and looking into stuff like this. Of course, there are other cryptid bears, but I kind of wanted to stick around the theme of them, the higher possibility of them being an Arctodus and Arctotherium, a giant short-faced bear, because these animals are just really interesting. And if we went into every bear story and every bear cryptid, we'd be here like all day. There'd be so many more, and I want to save more bears for other videos. But more importantly, I want to know how y'all thought about it. If you stuck around, subscribe if you like this video, like it if you liked it as well. Subscribe definitely though, but comment what you thought about it, and also comment what you would want to do for a new episode of Cryptid Corner. I kind of want this to be a place where we look into some pretty obscure cryptids or cryptids with really interesting stories or inspirations. I always find those pretty interesting. And by the way, I think we're very close to 2K while recording. We're like right at the cusp. So this is going to count as the 2K special, which is unbelievable. I don't know how the hell I got to 2K this fast. Y'all are insane. Y'all are amazing. Thank you all. And yeah, that's going to do that for the first installment of the Cryptid Corner. Look out for more videos. Icebergs aren't going anywhere, but this is a video I kind of wanted to take my hand at. So thank you for watching, and have yourself a damn good day.
Bye.